Hello and welcome to another edition of the Super Show. This is the CFL edition. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuce85 on all social media platforms. Usually joined by my co-host and partner in crime, Pete Cole, but he will not be here this evening at a family emergency, so they're wanting him to get his stuff taken care of. He'll be back with me next week, and he's still got MLB stuff heading this week. So you miss his pretty face, you'll definitely see him within the next 24 hours. Have no fear. 4 game CFL slate. We're doing another Thursday, Friday, Saturday slate. So lock tomorrow. There is the tournament on DraftKings. It's $10 5K to first, so it has been, broken up in half from the 10K to first to the 5K. Was a bit concerned that might happen. There was some overlay last week. We're looking at filling this thing at 2,941 entrants. As it stands right now, it's sitting at 700. So we have some work to do if we want to fill that. If you don't want tournaments to drop to 2K, to first, you definitely want to fill this. Me, I don't mind. I just won a showdown the other day. I'm not trying to be like a blowhard or anything, but it was a 1K to first showdown for Summer League. I'm happy. I'm happy to win 1K. That's fine. That's fine with me. But I know a lot of people like those big prize pools. Winning 5K to first, 10K to first is fun stuff. So if you want that stuff to happen, definitely get some entries in there and fill that up before DK turns it into like Aussie football, which is one that I've been grinding all season. And we're looking at $400 to first, $200 to first. Still grind it because it's fun, has edge, but smaller prize pools lead to less unique players. You get just kind of grinders who play at that level. So if you guys are watching live, appreciate it. Thank you for your support. We have the chat box there to the right side of your screen. You guys did a great job talking and interacting with us, making some predictions of your own. So feel free to talk throughout the show. In between each game, I'll look over, and if you have a question, I'll get it answered. Or if you have a comment that you want, read out, I'll do that for you as well. We had a lot of engagement. Appreciate it. I think we hit over 100 views. If you're watching right now, if you could hit that like button, helps us with the YouTube algo, getting us seen by more people, which enables us to create even more content for you guys, which enables you to win even more money. We are running the promotion at yourfielderschoice.com right now. Your first 2 months are 50% off. One price for all sports. Instead of $50, you're looking at $25 per month. So basically, a payment of one typical month for two. You'll get access to cheat sheets, Discord, premium only Discord chats, our top play articles, prize pick articles. We give free stuff out all the time. We do a lot of help with core plays, injury news, breaking news in the Dillards. Those of you that have been playing Summer League with me, those starting lineups and injury late breaking news has been critical. We've seen guys who have been out for 2 days draw ownership. Just the other day for the Pistons, Isaiah Stewart was 30% owned, even though it was announced that he had been out for 48 hours. So big edge to be had in these little, niche sports like that, where people aren't going to bother playing Summer League. They're not even, some of them aren't even researching it. So definitely want that. It's going to be huge in college football. Saturday morning, Pete and I typically break any late news if there's scratches. And not only that the news is happening, but how to approach it from a lineup standpoint. This person is player A is out. What does that mean for player B, C, and D? And, any sneaks and all that. So we're not just giving you the news, but we're also telling you, how we're going to approach it with our lineups and giving you that real advice to the point that we're not just telling you something, we're actually doing it ourselves. So you can trust us that any moves we're talking about or any players we're talking about, we are actually playing them. I know some sites don't do that. There's none in particular I'm going to call out or anything. I haven't heard some complaints for other sites, but we play who we say we're going to play. And that was last week with CFL. Just to talk about prize picks real quick. We went four out of five, so we missed one. Kadeem Carey's over 52.5 rushing yards hit, so if you flexed, you did well. Darrell Walker over 68.5 receiving yards. Johnny Augustine under 9.5 fantasy points. Augustine didn't even get a touch, by the way. He wasn't announced a starter, and he was still like 20 to 25% in various contests, which was kind of shocking to me. People stubbornly didn't want to believe that he wasn't going to get touches. He's not starting. I don't think he can really touch him, even at a cheap price. So easy under there. And then James Wilder Jr., a lot of us were talking about him. We loved him last week. He over 3 receptions. The only miss, and we have to own it, was Trevor Harris. We had over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Didn't get there. Decent fantasy score. Edmonton, their offense, we were expecting a lot more. A lot of us had Edmonton stacks, and it did not come through, which is truly unfortunate. But the slate was still pretty decent. Other than Harris, kind of underwhelming. If you faded Banks, Banks was super high owned. He didn't really pan out. Brian Burnham, who I liked a lot last week, he outscored him, caught a touchdown late, I believe. Wilder did well. So it was kind of a middling week for DFS. Prize Picks killed. Still filling things out. Teams, you got to keep in mind, some of these guys haven't played competitively. Some had XFL experience, some have been in the NFL, but a lot of these guys, they're truly just CFL players, haven't played competitive football since 2019. So there's a lot of teams that looked rusty. Going to do the normal slate game by game breakdown. Last week, we kind of did a preview format per team. Now we're going to break down game by game. You pretty much should be comfortable with these teams, at least to a little extent. There's only one team that had a first week bye, which was the Montreal Alouettes. They are on the slate, and we'll break them down for you in a kind of a preview standpoint. But otherwise, we're going to go straight through game by game here, and that starts with the Thursday game. BC versus Calgary. Now, BC had some QB issues going on. Michael Riley, we mentioned on the show that he hadn't been practicing, a little banged up, weren't sure if he was going to go. It was a situation to completely stay away from, and that's exactly what we did. He did play, but he ended up splitting with Ohio legend Nathan Rourke. Riley did throw 17 for 24, which is a pretty solid number, 203 yards, 1 touchdown. Rourke, 10 for 18, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Obviously, this is going to be a situation to avoid. I don't think we have full clarity here. He's listed as questionable again, Riley, that is, and actually at the last depth chart that I saw as the backup, I believe. So that means Rourke be the starter. If you're running multiple lineups and you want to get exposure to, like I said, Ohio's famous legend Nathan Rourke, you can definitely do that. 7K, which is really cheap. You can do a lot with a QB at 7K. That's going to get a lot of snaps. I mean, we're talking Fajardo at over 10K, Masoli 9K. Anybody who's going to score a decent 15 plus fantasy points in this league is well over 9K. So you're going to get a starter and a guy who's going to get majority of the work at 7K. It makes a lot of sense. Calgary's defense did not look great last week. They really gave up a lot more points than I thought they would to the Argonauts. They lost 23-20. They made McLeod Bethel Thompson look like a superstar. 37 pass attempts. He just torched them time and time again. 26 completions, 354 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Bethel Thompson's kind of a middling, in my opinion, a lot of other people's opinion, quarterback in this league. So get a guy like Rourke, who was, like I keep mentioning in Ohio, if you guys played CFB, DFS, or you followed the MAC at all, refer to it as the MACtion. It's kind of a run and gun league, lots of offense, lots of trick plays, all kinds of stuff. So Rourke is a guy capable of chucking the ball a lot. If the Stampeders defense is going to be that forgiving, I could see him potentially, having a slate breaking score if he has to throw it, because the Calgary offense is certainly going to perform. So if BC needs to keep up and pass, definitely the guy. The only issue is Riley can come in there and pilfer, 15 to 20 pass attempts. So I'm not really comfortable with that situation. So me personally, I won't be taking the quarterback from BC, at least in my main lineup. Running back wise, Shaq Cooper ended up being out. We were put on that 1 game injured list, which was just kind of a surprise. It thrust James Butler into the limelight. He played fairly well. Actually looked really well. What do you have? 8 carries, 24 yards, but it was the receiving end where he did his damage. 4 catches, 32 yards, and a touchdown. So very, very involved there. If Cooper were to be out again, I would have some interest at Butler at 7K there. Rainey didn't have any carries, just the return work. Kind of hard to play him at 5'9". I'd like to see him be a little bit cheaper before I seriously consider him again. Can break a long touchdown on the returns, but again, he's just a GPP guy. Wide receiver wise, it was interesting, man. Burnham came through at the end there for us, did get a touchdown, 7 catches, 92 yards and a score. It was Lucky Whitehead, though, that did the majority of the damage. 5 catches, 136 yards and a touchdown. He did have upwards of 8 targets. Lamar Durant, 5 catches, 61 yards. He was the most targeted. I believe he had double-digit targets. Only caught 5 of those. A lot of passing going on here. Like I said, Durant's wasn't necessarily catchable balls. Burnham is still very much in play. His price is 9.6 now. Still relatively cheap to really consider when you look at Banks' price. Burnham's ownership was sub 20%, something that I expected, something I expect again. So I do like him. I'll let others chase Lucky Whitehead. I don't expect a big game like that again, at least right away. He's going to definitely have those type of games throughout the season, but predicting them is going to be tough. When you have Burnham, you have Durant, you have Dominique Grimes, who they brought in, and Shaq Johnson, who they brought in. So they have a ton of targets on this team, and they're going to be, spreading the ball around. You look at the receivers, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys who caught balls. Dom Rhymes had 6 catches for 76 yards. He was extremely involved. Like I said, the running back Butler had 4 for 32. So it's very, very spread out. I expect them to have to throw the ball a lot. BC in the past has run the ball a lot. I don't think they'll have the lead here. I don't have lines in front of me yet for all the games. Instead, they kind of come out late, as we saw last week. So I would expect the receivers, at least one of these receivers to likely end up in the optimal. For me, I want to find a way to fit Burnham. I haven't completely built a lineup just yet. I do have a core in my mind that I will share at the end of the show. But he's my favorite. Like I said, I'll let everyone else chase Whitehead. If I was going to go with a non-Burnham BC receiver, I would probably go to Rhymes. Rhymes at 7-2. He has the touchdown upside in my mind that I'm looking for. I feel like he's going to be super low owned, and with the amount of targets and catches he had, it's very much in play. Similar upside to Whitehead. Certainly a higher floor most weeks. So like I said, if Whitehead's going to be the chase, then you go for 100 cheaper, go to Rhymes. Calgary side of things, Bo Levi Mitchell at 9K. He pretty nice game for him. I actually wouldn't mind using him. He's definitely a guy that I'm interested in. Cody Fajardo, sorry. He really cooked this BC defense last week. So I could see Bo Levi having himself a really nice game as well. Pulling up Fajardo's stats real quick. 230 yards, 2 touchdowns, 35 attempts, completed 28, very high completion rate, just the 1 interception. Spread the ball around, but I would just expect Bo Levi to have a nice game here at 9K and probably slide under the radar, maybe in that 15 to 25% range for ownership, with people probably going to more glamorous Fajardo against Hamilton, or even going back to our guy Harris, who I'm going to talk about here shortly. So I do like him at the 9K price tag. He had a decent game, really. They lost the Argonauts, which was shocking. Threw for 252 yards, though, and a touchdown. You'd like to see more touchdowns, but anything over 250 is generally pretty good. So I would expect him to be, much better. Looking at Kadeem Carey, he didn't find the end zone, which I was really hoping. I thought he was going to be major chop. Pete and I talked about it. He was, everybody was hyping him up. I figured he'd be well over 50%. Maybe the news of Cooper being out and Butler emerging and, a couple other backups with Harris being out affected his ownership a little bit. He ended up being like 40, maybe 50%, which still was fairly high owned, but I was expecting well over 50%, and that just didn't happen. He did carry the ball 18 times, 4.2 YPC, which is solid, 75 yards. As I mentioned, he didn't find the end zone, which was disappointing. But he did look very good on his carries. The backup, Milovocic Litre, I'm sure I butchered that. He had 5 carries for 25 yards. He was pilfering him in the second quarter because of his effectiveness, which is kind of irritating if you're a carry owner. But the fact that he got 18 touches there against the Argonauts is encouraging, especially when Bo Levi threw the ball 35. So it looks like they're going to have a nice mix of carries to passes, mostly for Bo, 32, 35, 36 passes. Run the ball 20, 22 times, just a real solid mix there. I'm back on Carey again. 7-1 is just way too cheap for a feature back for me. I don't think that he'll have nearly as much ownership, even in the 40% like last time, but definitely a guy that I want to look at. Now, the Rough Riders didn't run the ball super effectively against BC, but they didn't give Powell that many carries. We didn't think he would. He had 12 carries, 43 yards. He did find the end zone early in the game, and then Fajardo only ran 5 times. And the backup for 1 carry. So there wasn't a ton of rushing going on against BC. It kind of turned into a Saskatchewan, defensive touchdowns, and they got up early, and then BC started scoring some late, and Saskatchewan scored like 1 point in the second half. You'd think they would have ran the ball more, but they didn't have the ball that much. BC kind of 2 and out, 3 and out kind of thing, and had more ball control. So the second half wasn't that great. I think if Saskatchewan would have had the ball more, they would have given Powell more carries. So I am confident in being Carey. I'd like to see him get some catches this week, get the one catch last week for -2 yards. But yeah, if I'm going to get him at the 20% as a true blue RB1 who's going to get 15 to 20 carries most weeks, I'm in on him at 7-1. Much more comfortable with him than trying to figure out the Butler Cooper situation. That may change if it comes out tomorrow morning or even later that Shaq Cooper is definitely out, then maybe Butler's somebody to look at. But at best, or I should say at worst, we're looking at 25% ownership probably on carry because there's so many other running backs. And there's a situation with Andrew Harris again that he may be out. Toronto versus Winnipeg. The Argonauts getting a dub, man. If you think that you can catch lightning in a bottle again with McLeod Bethel Thompson, at 8K, had such a monster game. Really, really, I'm quite impressed with him. But I just don't think he'll be doing that again. Man, I don't know. He literally did look good. At 8K, I guess, if you're running multiple lineups, that's a cheap QB. As I mentioned, any QB1 under 9K deserves at least some consideration if they're going to throw the ball. Toronto has new coaches, new weapons, and I got to give it to them. Their defense still looked pretty weak, but they look good. So he's in play, certainly at that price of 8K. I probably wouldn't use him in anything besides the alt lineup. You do have John White there taking carries at 8K. That price is a little bit high for me personally. White's he's a gamer though. I mean, he only had 9 carries for 28 yards, but he did have 3 catches for 33 yards. He's going to be involved. But I think clearly this offense, they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. The defense for the Argonauts doesn't look that improved. It's going to take a year or two for them to really improve how bad they were last season. So I don't think White's really that playable, even in GPP at the 8K. It's kind of been a high floor guy over the last season or two. So I don't think there's a lot of upside even for running him in your alt lineups. I do see upside with the receivers, especially if we're going to see McLeod throw it almost 40 times a game. Ricky Collins was the biggest benefactor. He had 6 catches for 126 yards. Eric Rogers, who came over from Calgary, many of us expected him to be the WR1. 5 catches for 55 yards, still solid, but just a lot of guys, 2 catches, 3 catches, 4. Braverman in the first half looked really good. He had 5 for 42. Jawan Briskasson had his 9-yard touchdown catch. I used him on the 2-gamer. I was excited he got a touchdown early, but then he didn't really get targeted that much. So this is a really spread out receiver group. I don't think I'm really looking to use any. DeVaris Daniels, he only had 2 for 29, so you're really going to be risking it. I would love it, absolutely love it if people chase Collins Jr. At 7-9. He's going to have some weeks where he's the one that's got 3 catches for 30 yards. It's really just a guessing game. The de facto order the pecking order hasn't seemingly been set yet. And I think they're just going to be, truly finding whoever's open. And that was clear when we saw, Braveman, who usually is a non-factor, catching all these balls. They did release, I saw Chandler Worthy. So that opens up some, additional touches. Worthy was fairly productive in the past. So that does, kind of shrink down that pecking order a little bit, but I'm still not super gung-ho about it. Winnipeg side, Caleros is 7-9. He was pretty much a fade. That Hamilton game, that was the other thing. A lot of us, myself thought that, Hamilton would score some points. I didn't have a ton of them. I was fading, Banks. I wasn't going to pay his price. I wasn't paying for Masoli, and they were both super high owned, and they struggled. But they haven't played for a while, and fading those guys at high ownership is going to be a very scary situation week in and week out. Caleros though, 18 for 28, 217 yards, 2 touchdowns, leading them to a 19-6 win. And that's kind of what Winnipeg did in their Grey Cup run, right? They just gutted wins out, did what they had to do, and they looked good. Now Andrew Harris, this is going to be the clear chalk spot. If Harris is out, he's listed as questionable again. He wasn't practicing as of yesterday. Haven't seen any new updates here. Same with Darvin Adams, I'll talk about in a second. This is your prized weapon. They don't want to rush him back, and tweak his injury further. Brady Oliveira proved he could handle a heavy workload and run for big yardage. Why not start him again? He's only 6'3". Like I said, this is going to be the chalk spot. I like Carey still, but this was clearly the spot that needs to be targeted. He did rush 22 times. Obviously they had the lead. They wanted to control the rock. So he got carry after carry, 126 yards, one catch, 21 yards, no touchdowns, but still anytime you're going to get a guy in a CFL rushing for 100 plus yards, which doesn't happen that often, you gotta look at him. So if he draws a start, expect heavy ownership. He's probably got to be a chalk block at 6'3" if you're going to get a guy, capable of putting up 20 plus carries. And he gets the Argonauts defense, which is historically one of the worst rush defenses in the league, especially recently. He should just be able to gash them, honestly. So he's an easy play. Augustin, like I said, no carries. Don't even mess around with that. If he's going to get involved this week, I don't know why he would. After seeing that Oliveira can handle the load. Darvin Adams hasn't been practicing. He's officially questionable for Winnipeg. Expect him to probably be out. A lot of us, myself included, was on Dembski. I still like him. He's only 5'9". He did have 5 catches for 70 yards. He had a really good first series. He had 2 catches in the first series and a long ball of 30 plus yards. But Lawler was the one that benefited. Kenny Lawler, 4 catches, 69 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's going to be pretty up and down, I think, with Lawler. I don't know that that's going to be production that we can consistently expect to be, a touchdown guy every week. So for Lawler, I'm a little bit, if people are going to chase that, I'm off him. 6'5" is a very appealing price, no doubt. But I would probably be back on Dembski at the slot back spot. He had 7 targets, caught 5 of them. He's going to be fine in the end zone. I was a little surprised he didn't get any carries this past game, especially with them, nursing the lead. But I wouldn't be afraid to go back to him, especially if I want to play, Burnham or a couple, maybe a high price QB, maybe a couple good weapons that are going to cost me 8 or 9K. Dembski at 5'9" just kind of sticks out to me as one of those preferred options. He wasn't that high owned either. He really kind of burned people that kind of looked the other way. I think he might have been like 18, 19%, if I recall, in my single entry GPPs. He would have caught a touchdown, easily would have burned faders. So expect people to chase touchdowns, especially casual players that don't play or don't follow the CFL normally. They're not going to be looking at Dembski. This might be a good, I don't really talk DST. It's kind of like fill in where you go. It's how I write it. But this could be a good spot, play that Winnipeg if you want to pay up for a DST at 4.6 against the Argonauts. I'm not convinced that, Beth Thompson is going to be cooking every single week just yet. So I would probably be looking at them. Before I move on to the next game, let's take a peek here. G's in the house. K Sizzle's back. K Sizzle, big supporter last week. Appreciate it. Butler and Oliveira took most of the ownership away from Carey. Yeah, Carey could have burned him, man. But you're right. Like Oliveira at a cheaper price. White's overpriced. I agree with you. And Harris hasn't practiced this week. Yep. So pretty much, we're probably going to see Oliveira, be big chalk. So I almost could see maybe in a main lineup running 2 RBs. I don't normally build that way. And obviously we got Wilder to still talk about, but Carey and Oliveira getting all the love, all the carries in a situation where both teams could potentially be in a game control type of situation with BC's, quarterback situation as it is. I could see both those guys, getting 15 plus carries and potentially getting you the bonus of 100 plus. So I definitely don't mind that. Next game, Montreal versus Edmonton. This will be the first time Montreal's in a slate. They had that week 1. Vernon Adams is a QB. Some of you guys that follow college football may remember him as an Oregon quarterback a few years ago. I want to say 2015, 2016. Memory serves correct. He's a good career there in that one season. He had 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and only had a high completion rate, under like 70%, somewhere in there. Showed the ability to run, had a few rushing touchdowns. So definitely a guy that is talented enough for this league. Didn't get a lot of NFL attention, but he's tailor-made for the CFL. And I really like him in this spot, especially after seeing the way that Edmonton kind of came out flat, against Ottawa. They gave up just the 16. I could see some points being scored here. And I really do like Vernon Adams. The price is a little tough. It's 10-2. Getting him here without having a game yet. Obviously Edmonton, they got to shake off the rust earlier, so it may be a little risky, but I really just like Adams a lot. He's one of my favorite QBs in the league, so I'm definitely looking at him. Their stud RB is William Stanback. 8.3 is a really high price. I don't think I can justify paying that price for him when we have Carey, Oliveira, possibly even Butler for cheaper. All three, RB1 situations. Stanback did rush for over 1,000 yards last year, 7 touchdowns, had over 300 yards receiving. So definitely a factor, but 8.3 is just really hard to justify paying that for an RB. Even last week when people were asking about, Powell and White, even Thomas Erlington, who was really a big bust, outside of Wilder, I said it was really not worth for me paying up at running back just because I don't see the upside. And you guys saw the upside wasn't there with them. So even Wilder this week, who's almost 9K, may be a tough pill to swallow, even though it's a little different since he catches the ball a lot. So with that being said, I won't be rostering Stanback. Receiver-wise, you've got Quan Bray there at 7.8. He's definitely a name to know. This is another situation, though, where I don't know if I want to, outside of Bray, guess on which receiver I want to take. I think that Quan Bray is probably my favorite. He was an 800-yard receiver last year. He had 60 catches, 6 touchdowns. 7.8's not exactly getting a really good price on him. DJ Cunningham was a player to reward here early in the season in 2019. He had some nice games and then kind of fizzled out after. So I'm probably not using Montreal wide receivers outside of Bray. Maybe even Eugene Lewis, 7.6. He was a 1,000-yard receiver in 2019, 76 catches, 5 touchdowns. For me, I would rather just take the more established. Seeing how kind of lottery-style touchdowns were last week and guys shaking off rust, I'm going to probably just take receivers who have already got a game under their belt, and especially guys who, this would be a good week to go back to Banks, honestly. I didn't play him last week, but I think it would be, guys that didn't get a touchdown, their QBs are going to be looking to feed them, especially if they're a big time wide receiver. So I'm probably not using any of these guys. The prices are just okay. Edmonton. I would love to go back to Edmonton. Harris is 9.5 sitting there. He was shocked, and we thought he would be. He obviously burned some people, ourselves included. He threw 44 times, 333 yards, 3 picks. That easily could have gone the other way. There was some ducks that he threw out there. Had 5 carries. Definitely a guy that is going to produce at a high level week in and week out. Looking at the carry to pass ratio, it was 21 carries to 44 passes. So I really don't mind going back to Harris. In fact, I made, if I don't play Adams, if I talk myself out of the rust factor, which is, I really shouldn't be worried about that. But last week had me rattled a little bit. I think Harris is a good one to go back to, especially knowing that people in DFS industry that aren't hardcore grinders or don't follow a sport or don't play every slate, if they're casual, they look at box scores and game logs, right? So they're going to see that, Harris, he didn't throw any interceptions, or no touchdowns, he threw 3 interceptions. Let me go over to, somebody else like, Thompson or something like that, or Fajardo. So if we can get his ownership back below under, 40% range, I would definitely be all in. He has the weapons around him. Darrell Walker, James Wilder, Greg Ellingson, Armonte Edwards was sharp. Just an overall good offense, and they're going to score a lot of points. And don't be rattled about the 12 points they put up. There's going to be weeks they put up 30 plus fantasy or 30 plus real points. So I was thinking about fantasy, but Harris is my guy, so he's high on my list. The top 2 for me easily. Wilder, I said 8.7 is going to be a tough price, but looking at it, he had 15 carries, just under 100 yards. But 9 catches, 72 yards. Guy is going. That was an easy over 3 receptions on the prize picks. And we'll be looking at his prize picks total here at the end of the show. Like I said, I have a rule for myself in my vein of not paying over that price tag, over like 7.5, 8K for a running back, unless the situation is just mega optimal. I think it's good. He'll have a high floor, but I still feel like your opportunity cost is a little too high at 8.7. Especially with the team wanting to likely, get that passing offense back in check, look stronger, have Harris throw some, easy, type passes to his man Ellingson. I kind of expect, we're going to talk about wide receivers in a second. I expect a big game for Ellingson, but I just expect a lot of easy passing routes, slot type things, and those under 10-yard passes that you can just get his confidence going and really quickly accrue a lot of stats, a lot of yards, a lot of hopefully touchdowns. So Wilder's probably better suited for a GPP just because of that price. But I mean, if you have the salary for him, he's always going to be one of those guys that gives you a high floor. You know, going back to college basketball, do we roster Luke Garza or not? But we know he's always going to give us 40. Is he going to get 50? With football here, we know Wilder's going to give us what, 12 to 15 at minimum. Is he going to go over 25? It's just kind of what you have to, kind of go back and forth. It's harder to predict ownership in CFL, especially this early. It's much easier in college football and college basketball for us at least. So until we get to the point where we're predicting his ownership consistently, you're kind of just, it's a bit of a dice roll. If you fade and he goes nuts at 60%, obviously you're dead. But I mean, most weeks, I think it's going to be fairly spread out in the passing game. With that being said, I love Ellingson. I wish the price was cheaper. He's probably just a GPP guy, 8.5. But I mean, this is Harris's guy. They played together for a few seasons. All 5 of his targets he caught. They were, as I mentioned, they were a little bit shorter routes, so I could see him ringing those type of routes up all game long, especially early, and potentially be a yard guy. Maybe 8, 9, 10, even 10 catches. Yardage might be sub 100, but if he gets a touchdown and catches 8 to 10 balls, which is definitely possible, he could be a big time play. He had several games last season where he was hovering around that 7 to 8 mark, especially late. He had a game early in the season at 9. So, him hitting close to 10 is not that much of a reach. Obviously, with Darrell Walker around, that's going to be tougher because he's going to command a huge target share. He did have 10 targets on the game, 98 yards, just a tick short of that 100-yard bonus that we needed. I had him in my lineup with Burnham, very strong 1-2 punch. 8 catches, he's 88, and that's where you're going to have to really decide. You probably can't play Wilder with Walker. If you prefer the touches that Wilder is definitely going to get, you can go that route. But for me, I'm going to lean towards the passing offense here, and I think Walker's going to find the end zone and be a really big, scorer this week. Edwards is a little too high priced. He'll have those weeks where he pops in for a touchdown. But I'm really focused on the main trio of guys here for Edmonton. And the only reason I'm not jumping off them is because the rest of the field and pressing the industry and talking like I like to do with different people who play these niche sports or write about them. A lot of people are bouncing off of Edmonton and looking elsewhere. It's, this whole, fickle DFS industry that we're a part of. So I'm definitely going to have Edmonton exposure. It might not be 3 or 4 like it was last week. I'm definitely going to have a piece or 2. And this is a spot where if you think that, Montreal is going to be rusty, the Elks defense is only 4K. That's not bad. They were pretty popular last week because how cheap they were against the Red Blacks, was typically a terrible offense. So you can fit a lot up top with a cheap defense there and saving yourself, 1,300 from the Rough Riders, who, me personally, I wouldn't be paying that for a defense unless they're playing Toronto or something like that. And then the last game on the slate, Hamilton versus Saskatchewan. Hamilton was a letdown, big time, only 6 points. Masoli was pretty chalky. I saw him in some places upwards of 35%. Threw the ball 41 times, 240 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. The running game was non-existent. Arlington had 9 carries for only 29 yards and solely 7 carries for 26 yards. Just overall a tough day. Superstar Brandon Banks had 8 catches for 77 yards. That won't get it done at his high price. Jalen Acklin was the sneak. Pete really liked him last week. He had him in some lineups. 798, a touchdown. A little frustrated, you get a little flustered when your guy gets 98 and you're so close to the bonus, but he looked very good. Marcus Tucker was a guy that I thought may get a lot of the target share. He only had 3 for 23. Acklin looks like a guy that's going to be definitely heavily involved from day one. So we know Braylon Addison and Devier Posey are both out for at least 6 games. And we also know that Marcus Tucker, I was just talking about, it's been limited in practice, some sort of foot injury that he suffered, I guess. So questionable. So we could be looking at a really big target share for Banks, Acklin, Marshall, even Unger had a couple last week. But if ever there was a week to go ahead and pay 11K for Banks, which honestly makes me shudder. You guys know I'm Mr. Leverage. Anytime a guy that's super high priced, like a Luka Garza in college basketball, there are other examples, that's just a glaring one, or Banks in CFL at almost 11K. I just have a hard time paying that tag just because the opportunity cost is so high. Now, there is enough value to make it work if you wish, especially if you go cheaper at quarterback. But Banks 10-9 that's such a high price. He's going to need, even like a 7-101 touchdown game is really going to feel kind of like a letdown. You either need that multiple score, 125 plus yards, 10 plus catches. One of those stats is going to have to pop off the charts, and that very well could if Tucker ends up out. I am curious to see if the field jumps on Ackman after last week. Clearly a guy that Masoli likes. If Tucker is out, Ackman's going to get even more target share. So at 7K, I definitely think he's in the main team player pool. Not sure if I'll actually have him just yet in that main team. I know Pete's high on him again, though, and that's a really, really good price. For Saskatchewan, Cody Fajardo at 10-3. High-powered offense, always going to be in play. Always going to be one of the highest priced quarterbacks. 35 pass attempts, 230 yards let down. Did throw 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Definitely would expect more from him at that price. In play, though, dual threat guy that can do a lot of damage in any possible week. Unquestionable DFS play. So if you guys have never played CFL before, this is first week paying attention. Dardo is definitely a name that you're going to want to get yourself familiarized with. Running backs, William Powell's price is completely out of whack at 8.6. That's a really easy fade. Don't be the guy that, we say he's a fade and he scores 2 touchdowns, this week or rushes for 150 yards. Cool if he does, but on paper, paying 8.6 for Powell here in this spot really doesn't make a lot of sense because I don't think the Hamilton offense is going to sputter so much that Saskatchewan gets this, 12-4 lead or some random number where they just want to milk the clock and get out of there. Very unlikely that Powell pays off that 8.6 price tag, to be honest with you. 12 carries, 43 yards, and a touchdown. That's probably going to be a typical week for him. 15, 60, a touchdown. That's fine, but he's not 7K, and we still have 3 clear value running backs that are way better plays when you consider, your build within your lineups. Thinking less about, man, this guy scored the most points, I should have played him. It's really just kind of fish talk, and I don't want you guys to think like that. I want you to think about how your build comes together. You think about game script. NFL content creators talk about game script all the time. We talk about it in college football as well. CFL is a little different this league because there's one less down. They throw the ball more, and it's just really hard for a running back like Powell to get there at 8.6 when he's not really going to catch a ton of passes. Like an Andrew Harris would be worth that because we already know that he's going to catch passes. Wilder is worth that. He's going to catch passes. So if they're not going to get, it's not like the NFL. If they're not going to get 30 carries, they're really not worth that price tag. Wide receivers for this team, it's going to be kind of up and down for this squad as well. A lot of us, myself included, were pretty high on Jordan Williams-Lambert. He did have a nice PPR day, 6 catches for 49 yards, didn't find pay dirt. Shaq Evans, 7 for 69. Kieran Moore, 6 for 49 with a touchdown. Brandon Linus, 3 for 25 and a touchdown. Mike Pipkin, 3 for 36. William Powell, 3 for 2. So you see a very spread out offense there. I think that's probably going to be the case most weeks. I don't know how you could justify, check the chat here in a second, in case there's might disagree, but 8.7 for Shaq Evans is very hard asked when you've got a guy like Burnham. I'm a big Burnham fan. You guys are going to hear me talk about him all time in season, especially when it's cheaper. But I don't know. There's just better options than 8.7, I think. If you were to land there between 8.6, 8.8, that's your last spot, then by all means, and you love your build, Shaq Evans is definitely not a guy you want to kick out of your head, but he's not somebody that I'm starting my lineup with at 8.7. If anything, I'd go Kieran Moore at 7.4. I think he's going to be paying off that salary more than the Shaq Evans would. Like I said, we saw he was 6.49 a touchdown. I think that's going to be a typical, 8 or 9 target type of guy. And then Jordan Williams-Lambert, I think he's back in play. I mean, he's only 4.2. We saw his targets. He looked good. He had 7 targets in total, caught 6 of them. A lot of them were shorter routes, which, in the PPR format, it doesn't always have to be a home run, play. You don't always have to be looking for that 70-yard touchdown. They're nice, obviously, you love them. But if you get a guy at 4.2 who's, racking up these 3, 4, 5, 6-yard catches, all of a sudden it's halftime. He's got, 5 targets, 4 catches, 40 yards. Maybe he scored. You're feeling really damn good. My man last year from Pittsburgh in CFB, Addison, he was a guy that would be getting 8 catches by halftime, 60 yards. I'm talking about Jordan Addison, and he wasn't that glamorous player, but he was always paying off his salary. It took the industry a long time to catch on to that play because he really was never breaking big ones. And then he finally broke a big 60-yard touchdown for us, and it was game over. Everybody knew who he was. So you don't always have to be looking for those super sexy plays. Like I said, yes, they're great. But sometimes getting those PPR, guys like Williams Lambert is definitely going to be a winning play in the long run. So at only 4.2, he's a mega good value play at the position, to the point that I'm considering putting him in my core. All right, we're going to talk about prize picks here. Yeah, cases are like, that's the thing with Adams. He says, I'm not sure who to stack him with. It's just without having, a game under our belt and really no information outside of some, training camp practices, it's going to be tough. We saw last week with the receivers, the pecking orders were way different than we thought they were going to be with Calgary. I didn't even really talk. I got to circle back around. I skipped over the receivers. Let me talk about them real quick. I figured WR1 was going to be Hergy Mayala. Didn't work out that way. Josh Huff had an extreme amount of targets, 8 total, which Huff was a guy that we had talked about on the show. I like Mayala better because of his upside, but Huff is one of those, lunch pail type guys that's going to get all the targets. And then, Kamar Jordan, he got a touchdown. He looked really good. He's going to return to his 2017, 2018 form. 6.2 for him is a complete steal. So the pecking order for these receivers, especially in that first weeks, just might not be what we think. So with Montreal, it's really quite difficult to peg. Between Bray and Lewis and Cunningham, there could be, some other guys jumping in there and Absher. But I don't think I want to burn my main team on a spot there with one of those guys. I'm trying to guess. So, real quick before I talk about prize picks, skipped over there with the Calgary receivers. Jordan, real cheap price for him. I think, he's got to be in the conversation for main lineup. Looking at what he was able to do, 5 catches, 85 yards, 1 touchdown, 17, yard per catch average. Pretty strong overall. 5 targets, caught them all. Doesn't show any sign of being injured. I might be getting a little too giddy about him, but I definitely like him. I'm not ready to give up on Hergy Mayala just yet. I think that there's going to be much better days ahead for him. 2 catches for 16 yards. That's not going to be. He was way too good at the end of the last season that Calgary played for him to not step up and be close to at worst a WR2. And Huff, like I said, he's going to be one of those guys that I talked about that's not sexy by any means, but a PPR guy. Huff was one I used a lot in 2019 at cheap price tags that I'll value. And somebody that 6 for 60 in a touchdown type line is going to be something that he consistently puts up, I think, in his offense. So I like Huff a lot. I like Jordan a lot. And like I said, I'm not ready to give up on Mayala just yet. What'll happen if I jump off a guy like that? He'll go completely ballistic. So somewhere out there, I'll have a lineup with Mayala. All right, prize picks. Let's see if we can build on the 4 for 5 hit that we just had. Like I said, it's probably best to flex if you run a big 5-pick play like that. That way you can still miss one. The power plays are really best for 2 or 3 picks. Obviously, if you hit a 5-pick power, you're going to be feeling real good about yourself. Looking at my first one that I want to play, Lucky Whitehead, 14 fantasy points. I will be going on the under there. Lately, in a lot of other sports, we've been hitting the under. Unders are not as exciting to bet, and I just don't see Whitehead having such a big game this time. I think it'll be more spread out, or I think somebody else will step up in his place. So under 14 fantasy points there for me on Lucky Whitehead. Single stats for passing touchdowns. Trevor Harris back to the 1.5. I'm going back to that stubbornly. That was the one we missed last week. I think he throws at least 2 touchdowns this week. So give me the over 1.5 for him. And then rushing yards, going back to Kadeem Carey, 65 rushing yards. Feel pretty strongly about him going over that. I think we could have the 100-yard week here. It's coming for him. I'm a big Kadeem Carey fan. And then receiving yards, gonna give you guys one for each category. Darrell, man, if I'm going under on Lucky Whitehead, I should probably go under on his because his receiving yards are 75, but I think that one's closer. I am going to go a little aggressive on Darrell Walker, over 85 passing yards. I think this is a week we see 100 passing or receiving yards, from Darrell Walker. And then passing yards, the video may be a little different, so you guys know. Passing yards starting out here, Vernon Adams, it's 245. Feels low for my guy, Vernon Adams. While I am scared of rostering him on my DFS lineup for fear of rust, 245 passing yards is too small for him. So I'll be going over 245 passing yards for our guy. Mine and Sizzles, it appears, Vernon Adams over 245 passing yards. Core-wise, it's going to be really, really easy. If Harris is out, Oliveira's got to be core. Carey semi-core. If Harris were to play, then I would just go right to Carey. Personally, I'm a big fan of his. Wide receiver wise, I think we're gonna go cheap and go with Williams Lambert. It's just way too cheap at 4.2. It allows you to pay up at QB, allows you at least 1, maybe 2 pay ups at your other wide receiver spots. So Williams Lambert at 4.2 will be core next to Oliveira. And then going to court my QB. For now, we'll tentatively say Trevor Harris 9.5 core because I just can't say Adams is for sure the lock that I want him to be, but Trevor Harris to me is the lock at 9.5. You see there's 3 other QBs ahead of him, Fajardo, Adams, and Masoli. Masoli is a fan favorite. A lot of people roster him, so he's going to take ownership. And then right below him is probably Levi Mitchell. So Harris just kind of right in the middle there. Just burned people last week. Bad taste in their mouths. Hopefully that means lesser ownership for us and an opportunity for 2-3, big touchdown passes, 300 plus yards, and a mega day where Edmonton takes us to the cash this time. That will basically wrap it up. Appreciate it, everyone who followed live. This is on demand as well, leading up to Friday game, Saturday game, and the lock tomorrow, of course. Expect a Friday preview show. Pete will be back with me. We are starting our college football preview shows. First up is tomorrow, actually, ACC preview. So we'll be covering all the teams there, walking you through the QB to pay attention to from each, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. From a fantasy perspective, of course, any sneak plays, any guys who have been tearing up camp, guys who are obvious, guys who you're going to fade, all that good stuff. And we're going to roll that through next week when we preview SEC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 as well. So college football is right around the corner. Be ready for that. We're grinding summer league. We're not doing articles on that in our premium Discord. We are getting player pools, getting news there. It's been very profitable thus far because of injuries and news and all that. It's very hard for people to find that stuff in a timely manner. Big time edge. And those of you who grind the WNBA with me, WNBA is back. There is a big, I believe, 5K to first tournament on the 17th. Sunday, there are 5 games as well. So I believe there'll be a Sunday slate that pops. So we're only a mere few days away from WNBA money back in our pockets. On Dub Deuces, aka Dub Deuces 85 on Twitter, Walter Waddell. Expect Pete back with me this or tomorrow for the preview show. Also go to Your Fielder's Choice. $25 a month for your first 2 months gets you access to every single sport we offer, from esports to niche sports to NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA. We've got it all. Very, very proud of our product and a very good Discord community that helps each other out. We frequently have subs and members who post information and news and everything for us when, we can. Everybody's got those noties on. By far, one of the most efficient Discords on the server there. And I don't say that as a bias either. I really do believe that. Appreciate it, guys. Best of luck. I'll be in the Discord throughout the night and all obviously tomorrow leading up to lock for all your last minute CFL stuff. I'll also tweet out any news that I see with Harris or any injury news. But thanks. Best of luck.